I wish like it was just focused better. Like, and then I came across the Lumix G85 and I was like, wow, this camera just offers so much. I think I can do something with this. So that way I can, make the camera be more versatile for my use. I guess the biggest difference for me was getting the right lens at the very beginning.
In this episode of the Lumix Creators Podcast, we're sitting down with Timothy from the Commodore Productions, who creates amazing stunning visuals for the past 5 years on the G85, which, to my surprise, we'll be diving into why and when you should be upgrading your camera body, how to get the most out of older cameras, and why story is honestly truly the king at the end of the day. So without further ado, Timothy, what's up, man?
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for joining me on this episode. Before we get into the full topic about why you've been shooting on the G85 for the past 5 years, upgrading to the S9, can you just give my audience a little bit of context of who you are, what you do, and all that good stuff?
Yeah, so my name is Timothy. I run pretty much my own company called the Commodore Productions. You can find that on social medias of Instagram and YouTube. And pretty much I've been a video editor, videographer, director, producer, and kind of making my film journey through, I guess you could say, like the Lumix G85, which is kind of crazy. But mostly, I guess you could say it would be in my video editing is how I kind of took off in my career. But yeah, it's great to be here. Excited to talk more.
Yeah, man, you're an insane editor. I saw your like tennis commercial, then I saw a couple of your other stuff. I'm curious to hear some like warm-up questions here is, what was your introduction to Lumix as a brand, and what was that first Lumix camera? I'm assuming it's the G85, since it is like you could get it used right now for like $350.
Yeah, so Lumix as a brand, I think at the time it was COVID. I think that's when because I just moved to a new country, actually, because I've been living abroad previously to that, so different parts of the world. And I finally settled down in Canada. And then at the time, I wanted to kind of dive full in with, video, because that was kind of like my passion growing up. And I didn't really get a chance to kind of do that until, I got here and everything was shut down. I was like, what, why not? So I was looking at camera brands and stuff, and I was like, oh, well, should I go? Because I used to have like a Nikon D3300 to start. so I was like, okay, yeah, it's a great camera for video and everything, and also a GoPro. But then I was like looking for something like a little bit better, just 4K, 24 frames per second was kind of like my minimum requirement. And then also, I was looking for maybe something with like easy things or easier to color, but just not too like extensive on the budget. So I was kind of looking like on the lower budget at the time. And then I came across the Lumix G85 and I was like, wow, this camera just offers so much. I think I can do something with this. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to go get it. So I went to go get it. I got the kit lens, and I also got the 25 millimeter f1.7 lens. And
great
that's
lens.
pretty much, yeah, it's a great, actually, like I stuck with that lens for the longest time too. Those two lenses, like for like, I think 3 years or something like that. So it's crazy to kind of think about like when you're reflecting back on this, but yeah, like that's how I pretty much got started with Lumix. It was just through research. I came across Nigel's tutorial videos about like Lumix and stuff, and then some other creators as well. But like that's how I kind of got into like the G85, and I was kind of sold at that point. So yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy when you like first get started off, like the G85, great camera, and you think like, oh yeah, 4K, 24, 30 frames a second. And then for like new people, not even thinking about like the codecs of like, is it 8-bit versus 10-bit? You're just like, yeah, it's 4K video. That's it. That's all I need. It has stabilization. It's great.
Super simple. Yeah.
Those times are much simpler. So now kind of moving forward is, what's your current camera setup we're looking like right now?
So current camera setup, actually, I upgraded it earlier this year, actually just at the beginning of January or something. I just got the Lumix S9 because I was kind of sold on the fact that it was like super small, full frame sensor. So that way, like I can, because I was struggling with low lighting a lot. And I was like, I think if I'm going to upgrade, I'm going to upgrade to something a little bit, a little bit more decent that can take, native ISO and all that stuff. So I was like, I'm going to go full frame on this. And then also still small and compact, because I like to bring my camera on when I personally just travel on my own. and I just like kind of having that like adjustability. But then I was looking into like rigging it out as well, so I was seeing like some other people rigging it out, and I was like, oh, you know what, maybe I can try to give that a shot as well, and went for like like a bigger production shoot, or not like bigger, but just like because like it just fits the criteria of what I can output. So
I think so. That's going to be the little bit of the tease for more of the tail end of the podcast, getting more specific and more deeper into talking about like that upgrade and choosing the upgrade. But pulling it a little bit back to that G85, when you first got it and then like started using it over the years, what kind of projects were you shooting with the G85, and ultimately how did that kind of like shape your style today on how you're filming things?
Yeah, so the G85, because it had quite a bit of limitations on it, like no autofocus, no, I guess low light was kind of, those are the two biggest factors I would say, those right there. But kind of what I went into first was actually my first projects with the G85 was music videos. So I got started in music videos. We did like a lot of low light type of things. So I was like, oh, how the heck am I supposed to find lighting? So like I was looking for locations that had a little bit better lighting, like because we were in a parking lot outside at night. And I was like, okay, I got to stay closer to the lamp to kind of get better lighting at that time. And I wasn't even relying on like the exposure meter at the time either. I was just relying based on like what I was seeing off the camera. And actually, like it turned out really good. The client loved it and everything. But, it's like at the time I was just like, just figuring out like, like all the little technicalities to it. I guess I wasn't figuring that out until later on, but like looking back, it's kind of funny how I just did that. And then other ones that started to go in was like, I guess a little bit more corporate videos. And then I got into like wedding videography as well, and some events, but mostly I was kind of switching between cameras. So like I would use the G85 as like kind of like a backup, and but then I was renting or borrowing the other filmers that hired me out or something. So I'd use their cameras, or I would just rent out another camera. So like I got to use the Sonys, I got to use Blackmagics, I got to use Canons, and then for different jobs, I took on whatever camera. So then I kind of just built, I guess a base of knowledge for all cameras, and then it kind of geared towards what I liked at the end, and then at the end I still stayed with Lumix, which is kind of funny, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it is actually good to note, like when you are shooting for paid clients, just to throw rental budgets into the project itself, or taking a cut, so it's like you can make the project much higher quality and you don't necessarily have to own every single piece of camera equipment, which is something I wish early on someone told me, that you don't have to own everything. Now I just have an entire rental house basically at this point with too much camera gear. But kind of curious on one point you said there, you talked about kind of the limitations with the G85, how autofocus isn't great on the back in the day on contrast-based Lumix cameras. Low light, obviously it's micro four thirds, there's different advantages from that. Were there ever like moments where you kind of felt limited by using the G85 camera, or alternatively did those limits actually make you more creative, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so both. Like I felt limited like when it came to, I guess, like in the moment, you're just like kind of like, oh, I wish I had like this lighting scenario, or I wish like it was just focused better, like because when you look back at the footage, sometimes it was not focused as much. So then I guess it led me to become more creative in my craft, and so it kind of led me down the line of like, okay, if this didn't work, what can I do to make it work? So I figured that like, oh, if this blurred that didn't work, can I make a transition out of it, or can I make something out of it in post-production? And that's how I kind of accelerated my skill set in post-production. And like then I found out like, hey, actually I don't really need like to upgrade my camera gear, because I was entering like competitions, I was using other people's footages for like competitions. I started to win them, and I was like, oh hey, like maybe I'm doing something right. And then I don't have to upgrade my gear at the end of the day, because I was contemplating. I was like, should I get Sony, because it's just autofocus was just so dialed in, like low lighting, because I used the Sony A7 III I think at the time for some wedding stuff, and I was just like, wow, this is just like you just set and go, like you don't have to worry too much about it. And I was like, okay, but then I saw some competitions, like I said before, and I was just like, maybe I should try using other people's footages, and because they came with different from different cameras, and I was like, maybe I can try to work on that. So building the story, building transitions, building upon like my skill set in editing, and that's how I kind of accelerated my career path from there.
Yeah, and I feel like there's a thing that's to be said. I think there's 2 points that from there that I want to draw to. One is if you know your limits of your camera, you can kind of like exceed them or use it to your advantage. Like you said, like when something was out of focus, how can you make that into a transition? Also, it forces you to learn how to manual focus. I think most people who are used to autofocus cameras and then want to move into the professional filmmaking world that requires some manual focusing here and there from time to time, depending on how big of a crew it is. If you don't know how to focus or pull focus, like it's going to be hard to become a first AC for like any DP that needs someone to be pulling focus for them if you've never practiced that. So I'm curious, before we get into that, my second question on this, what do you think is the importance of knowing kind of your camera inside and out? Because I imagine using the G85 for yourself, you've probably learned how to use that camera to its fullest potential and learned like most things on the limitations and how to like work with and kind of around them.
I think learning to be, I guess the biggest thing was like learning when you're taking your camera out. I think the biggest thing is like learning to be fast, especially like on a client shoot, or like even when I travel with my my girlfriend, who's now my fiance, but but like, yeah, thank you. but yeah, so it's like when we travel, you want to be mindful of like, time spent at an area or something. You don't want to be like, just kind of like pausing and figuring out your shot composition, everything. You kind of want everything to be quick. So like, and so like with clients and with personal travel with like family and relatives and all that stuff, it's pretty much like you have to be like, it kind of teaches you to figure out your camera in that sense, if that makes sense. Yeah. So like over the time periods, I grew to understand that like, oh, hey, I could do, tweak this setting here. Oh, I could do a little bit of this here. Oh, when there's lighting in this position, maybe I go around this way or something. So it's just like figuring out those small nuances and then just becoming like more and more quicker and quicker each time. And then like if I wasn't able to be quick enough, I would question and be like, how can I do it next time, right? And then that's how I would like go into the settings, go try to look it up on YouTube, or just try to understand like different ways to go about it. So that way I can, make the camera be more versatile for my use, even though I know its limitations, but it's like you got to work with what you got essentially. So
it's actually funny that you say that, because I feel like people that came from Lumix contrast-based autofocus systems to like now the phase detect autofocus systems on Lumix, it just makes sense because they know how to get good autofocus with the contrast-based cameras. Therefore, they're most likely going to be knowing how to get really good autofocus with the phase detect. That's like works way better because there is a little bit more extra steps on knowing how to use your camera. I think a lot of people that come from Sony cameras and come to Lumix cameras and the autofocus doesn't work the exact same way. It's not a 1-to-1 ratio. I feel like they're just like, oh, it just doesn't work. It's not performing. Where it's like, well, if you're using full area and just letting the camera just go off rip and do whatever it wants, it's not going to be like giving you the most accurate results. Would it be great to get there? Of course. But I feel like Lumix autofocus is a good example of like what you were just mentioning there. Now, second thing I want to kind of touch point on from something you said a little bit earlier on in terms of like the editing, the skills, different things like that. What skills and I feel like gear recommendations would you recommend to people learning or buying instead or before they decide I want to upgrade my camera body?
I would say, I think the biggest thing, I guess the biggest difference for me was getting the right lens at the very beginning, like just the one lens that can do it all. And I would say like for me, actually, the kit lens, I would say, was probably the most versatile lens to learn on. But I would pair that with like the 25 millimeter prime lens, which is equivalent to like the 50 millimeter if you go full frame, right? So yeah, so those two lenses, I think, those help you with composition, help you to get that like cinematic, I guess you kind of look, right? So that I think the lenses kind of play a really good, big factor into that. Also because with my G85, I was limited with lighting, so so having the as much, or the lowest aperture as setting as possible, so the f1.7 really helped, like kind of in those dark situations for me. Whereas like when I took out my kit lens, it was completely black and I couldn't do it at night at times, unless I was able to find some other like lighting alternative. So I think that was the thing. Other than that though, I would say, I think that's pretty much it. Like from my experience of using other cameras, upgrading and all that other stuff, like you can get, like you can get like mics, you can get other things. But to be honest, I didn't use a mic for the longest time either. And because I wasn't doing like interviews per se, I was mostly doing like events and all that type of stuff. And so I learned to sound design and really, harness in like that type of skill set when it comes to editing. So I guess it's like, I really learned to fix it in post whatever like it came to be. So like I think what you just at the end of the day, what you really need is just like a decent lens, like maybe and that's pretty much it. So
yeah, there's actually a funny quote that's misquoted all of the time, which is everyone says like be a jack of all trades but master of none. And it's actually really ironic that you said that, because I feel like you're becoming a master of the editing side, and typically the actual quote is be a jack of all trades and master of one and not none. So it's that sense of like, what are you becoming a master of in your craft while being a jack of all trades, and if that makes sense. But then the follow-up to that is you did eventually upgrade, obviously, because you started feeling those limitations. Why did you feel ready to upgrade to the Lumix S9, and kind of what were those main factors for choosing the S9 specifically over the S5 II or S5 IIX?
Yeah, so I was looking so hard at the time. Oh, well, I guess like for the last, actually a couple, each year I kind of reflect and try to see what's the latest camera and stuff. But it was essentially like my criteria was like, it has to be small. It has to be able to take in low light. It has to have better autofocus. And, like I just like, yes, the S5 IIX was like a great choice, and I almost like kind of jumped on that like during my trip to Japan, I think 2 years ago or so. And I was like, you know what, I think I might jump on this. But then I was like holding back because I was like, but it's so like it's much bigger than the G85, and I was just not really sold on that size because I was looking for something a little bit more portable when I travel and stuff, at least similar to what I had with the G85. Although it's like not too much of a difference if you really kind of like compare it, but to me, like I think like that's kind of like, I want something a little bit light, a little bit smaller. And then when the S9 came out, I still waited too, because I was like, I'm not sure if this is for me, because I knew its limitations, and I'm like, is this good for the long run or something? So I kind of waited it out, saw like a little bit more reviews about it, and then over the time period, I was like, you know what, I think like after researching, I was like, I can rig this out, I can make this work, for both my personal and my business matters and stuff. So I was like, you know what, maybe I can lock in and go from there, because at the time I was getting a little bit more shoot stuff or filming stuff. So I was like, you know what, I can take maybe I can upgrade to this. I can kind of justify that, if that makes sense. Because then I was like, the G85, I was using it more extensively for all those film stuff, and I was like, I don't know, you're just limited with some stuff like lighting and autofocus and all that stuff. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna make the jump to the S9.
I mean, it's a great camera. It's one of my cameras for myself personally that made photography fun again with real-time light when it wasn't available to the S5 IIX, because I just have a dumb amount of Lumix cameras right now. But I'm curious to hear then for yourself, when switching over to the Lumix S9, has your shooting with the Lumix S9 changed your workflow to day on how you shoot or how you operate your camera, or is it pretty similar to the G85?
In terms of the day to day, I guess there's a little bit little things. I think if I film YouTube videos, I don't have to worry about autofocusing, because I would have to set up something and then pre-focus it, and then is it in focus, and take it, and I'm like, it's not in focus. So it's I don't have to worry about that too much now. So I think that's a really nice thing about the day to day. But then if you go to maybe post-production, color grading wise, I have a lot more flexibility. Lighting, if it wasn't that good or something, I can at least have that flexibility to kind of adjust that from there.
Yeah. And then do you use any tools from Lumix himself, like the Lumix Lab app, and in relation with the camera and controlling it or different things like that as well, or don't really touch that much?
Lumix Lab app. Actually, I did start using it to take more photos because I didn't used to do that. Like, because, like when you are so busy with things and you collect all your photography from your travels, you need to like, ah, shoot, I have to go edit them. so, so then like afterwards, like they just kind of collect, in like a hard drive and just kind of sit there for so long, right? And then now with the Lumix Lab app, I can just take photos. It's already color graded, right? So then you can just you can upload it onto your phone straight from there. So it's like a lot quicker, for personal stuff. And I really love that about that. So yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the real-time LUT from that, like how Lumix S9 implemented it and then all the other cameras get it as well. I feel like real-time LUT for people who are casual photographers and more filmmakers first is just like kind of a no-brainer in a sense where you're like, oh, cool, I can just have photos instantly to my phone, post it on social media or upload it as a story, or same with the MP4 Lite videos, put it on a video, send it to my phone, upload it is like so nice. I feel like to have, especially because this exact same thing. I would take a bunch of photos from a trip. It's all in RAW and I'm like, I don't want to edit any of these. It's so much work.
I know.
Like, it's so boring.
It's like you have to go one by one, and you're just like, oh my god, like it's just like you said, it's like work.
It's so much work. Yeah, for people that aren't like big into it, and like now with like they just created, which just came out like literally this week. That we're filming this, the Magic LUT, which is interesting to test around and play around with. I'm very curious on how that will eventually change people's workflows. But also curious on how it will affect people who create LUTs and sell LUTs on the platform. If people's work is just gonna get ripped off.
It's this new era, man. Like with AI and everything too. It's kind of like it's depressing, but it's coming, right? So it's like you have to adjust and adapt, and like I guess you kind of have to accept it, right? So.
Right, yeah. I can get into a whole topic about AI because I'm trying to automate everything right now and like even uploading to multiple platforms. But regardless of that, coming back into this topic, just one last question before we're kind of like, as we're last question, as we're slowly landing the plane here, before I get into some of the final questions here, when do you actually think it's time to upgrade your camera body? Or when do you would give advice to someone to upgrade their camera body?
I think it's important to kind of look at it every year of like your work, your line of work. Does it demand your camera? Like for me, because like I was mostly doing video or editing. I guess my work started off in editing and kind of progressed extensively there. Even when I was on like big projects, like big events for like, F1, NHL, Super Bowl, and even up to a point where like I was like working on like Emmy winning projects as well. Those like I still wasn't able to justify upgrading my camera because I wasn't really using it at the time. I was just using it for like, I was doing like a B shooter for something, or I was like someone was handing me off another camera to use at the time, so I was using maybe a Blackmagic camera or a Sony camera or a Canon camera at the time, or I rented it out for a particular shoot just because I needed that I guess that quality or upgrade for the client or whatever. But I think you would just have to kind of look at your demand. If it's just increasingly incremental and you find that your workflow is just like, I think it's time for me to like get rid of this, stop and or I guess like slow down in workflow. Because then at that point, then you can just say that like, yeah, I think it's time to upgrade. So yeah, I think it depends on your situation, but I would say that like if you find that your workflow is really like halted by the camera itself, you should look into upgrading for sure. But if you find that like you're not getting the work with your camera, you're just like you're using it for personal, or it's just on the side where your profession is something else, then just wait, because there's always a better camera around the corner, like every time, right? So it's like someone will get like the S9 and then realize that maybe something better will come out later, right? So
right, yeah, it's definitely never jump the gun and get the camera right away. I don't think that's ever the best advice to give anyone, right? Especially right when it comes out. I always would recommend like give it some time, especially if the used market happens or different things like that happen. But I am personally curious, why did you stick with Lumix if you basically had to get new lenses, you had to get a new camera body, you had to basically start over from ground zero by switching from MFT to full frame? Why did you stick with Lumix out of curiosity?
Well, I mean, I didn't have too many lenses to begin with in the Micro Four Thirds, and like I really limited myself of like what I should buy and what was needed, right? So what was needed was just like it was able to get the job done, and I was like, people were happy with my results, and I was also happy with my results, and I was just like, you know what, maybe I can just see how long I can take this, right? I didn't need to, justify anything of that sort. Until like, and I stuck with Lumix, I guess, going back to that question, is because it was like I think the color science, because I also worked with like clients that shot on or not clients, but like for other filmers that sent me footages, they shot on Lumix too, right? And I was able to compare, right? So I worked with Red, I worked with some, all the other cameras, and I was still, it's like I kind of loved the colors in Lumix when I worked off of that, and so that's why I kind of stuck with Lumix when I decided to get a camera, because it was like I really liked the color science on it, and it was like a lot, like I was familiar, like more not familiar, but I was just like more comfortable, I guess. I'm not sure if it's like a bias thing, because I kind of started off with Lumix, although I did start off with Nikon, I guess you could say, and GoPro, right? So it's like so I don't know, like but like my main camera now, it's like it's Lumix, and I just kind of stuck with that, and I think that's maybe a little bit of a bias there, but I don't know, it's just me.
100% probably. I mean, same situation. I mean, I had a cheap GoPro type thing, and then I had my dad's Nikon camera, but Lumix G7 was like my first personal camera that I bought with my own money. And there's definitely some bias, like whenever you buy your first camera. And it's interesting now because most higher end budget cameras, or just budget cameras in general, like the Lumix S9 kind of fits, I would say, in today's market in terms of the economy, especially here in the US and Canada as well, I'd imagine, where everything just costs more. It feels like there's not really a solid $500 camera. And especially, you can get the Lumix S9 used like in good or excellent condition for like maybe $900 to $1,000, which is pretty great for a full frame camera that has like almost all the same settings and video specs as the S5 Mark II, which is pretty cool. So before we get into the final question for today's episode, Timothy, where can people check you out on the platform? Even though I think we'll be doing some type of collab post here on YouTube that they can instantly click on as well.
Yeah, I mean, you can just find me at the Commodore Productions, pretty much on YouTube and Instagram, and that's pretty much where you'll be able to find me. If you want to find like more of my work and stuff, it would be on my website. But most of the stuff most of the work I showcase would be on my Instagram as well. So yeah, that's where you guys can find me.
Sweet. So my final question for you, Timothy, is going to be, what do you hope people can kind of take away from this conversation, especially when they hear the camera doesn't matter?
I just hope that because I think we get stuck in trying to get the latest and best gear, especially when you're starting out, right? Because when people start out, when I started out, I was looking how can I make this work for the long term? But then when you get the first camera and you're just like, oh, this looks nice, or this little attachment looks nice, and this stuff, and it just kind of adds up, right? And so I think, don't get stuck too much with the gear itself. I think for me, when you're working on video editing, the post-production side, I think being able to build a story, being able to understand the pacing of everything, and then adding in elements like sound design and music and all that type of stuff, and really understanding that part, and then you can reflect on that and then say that, hey, next time when I go out film, I can film it better, right? And try to use the same gear that you currently have, and then just use it as much as you can. And that's another thing too, is just take out your gear and just go out there and shoot, because that's the best way you can learn. Put yourself in scenarios that you are just not comfortable with, right? So that way you can really understand the tweaks of tweaking your camera to the point of I can make it work for any scenario. So yeah, that's pretty much my message.
Dude, such good advice. Well, thanks, Timothy, for joining me on today's episode and podcast of the Lumix Careers Podcast.
All right. Thank you, Matthew, for having me.
And if you guys are interested in checking out another episode with Nigel Bajos about budget L mount lenses, check out that video right there. YouTube recommends you might like this video right here. Until next one, guys, peace.